Claudia Webbe.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms McVie, and I wish to also thank my honourable friend for Stockport for securing this very important debate. Despite the Bhopal gas explosion occurring almost 40 years ago at the Union Carbide plant in Bhopal, as we've heard, hundreds of thousands of Bhopalis are still living in its long shadow, unable to move on with their lives with dignity and with justice. In addition to the 3,000 people that died almost immediately, there have been a further 20,000 deaths and 120,000 cases of people suffering from health problems, including severe deformities and blindness as a result of the toxic seepage into the surrounding area from the plant. Since the disaster, survivors have been plagued with an epidemic of cancers, menstrual disorders, including the early onset of the menopause, and what one doctor described as monstrous births. Thousands of Bhopalis cannot work, physically move or study, living a miserable existence without any surviving family members. The apparent root cause of the accident was that the plant had not been properly maintained following the cessation of pesticide production, with tons of toxic chemicals remaining on site, left completely unmaintained and unchecked. In reality, the root cause was greed. It wasn't until 1989 that Union Carbide, in a partial settlement with the Indian government, agreed to pay out the equivalent of £400 million in compensation. The victims weren't consulted in the settlement discussion, and many felt cheated by their compensation of between £250 and £450 per person. This equates to 5 years' worth of medical expenses. Today, those who are awarded compensation are hardly better off, because with such paltry sums, over the long term, this amounts to just 5p a day. The cost of a cup of tea in India for a lifetime of unimaginable suffering. All whilst Union Carbide, now of course under Dow Chemical, who effectively sought to water wash their crimes by sponsoring, as we've heard, the London 2012 Olympics, and who operate in nearly every country in the world, including here in the UK, and who have a market capitalisation of nearly £34 billion, failed to atone for its corporate crimes and is yet to pay the Bhopali people so that they can get justice and live with dignity. The final figure agreed 5 years after the disaster was only 15% of the original settlement amount that the government of India had asked for. The amount was far below international compensation standards, as well as those set by the Indian Railways for accidents, the standard that Union Carbide had said it would use. In 1991, the local government in Bhopal charged the American Warren Anderson, Union Carbide's chief executive at the time of the disaster, with manslaughter. But neither the US nor the Indian governments, it would have to be said, of the day, were interested in his extradition to face trial after he fled India. The Union Carbide Corporation itself was charged with culpable homicide, a criminal charge whose penalty has no upper limit. These charges have never been resolved, as Union Carbide, now Dow Chemical, of course, have refused to appear before an Indian court. Dow Chemical says the legal case was resolved in 1989 when its previously named Union Carbide settled with the Indian government for the equivalent of £400 million, and that all responsibility for the factory, they say, now rests with the local government of the state, which now owns the site. To this day, despite requests to appear in court from the Indian government, and despite the compensation which itself may well be regarded by some as admittal of guilt. The company and its chief executives have not faced criminal charges, and yet Dow's share prices keeps on rising. In 2010, 8 Indian employees were found guilty of neglecting to adequately maintain the factory once it was not profitable. And it was this neglect that led to the explosion, as we know. They were ordered to pay just less than £1,500 each, which of course campaign groups have said is an insult and simply pocket change for the executives. On that day, Hamidi B stood weeping. She said, "Nobody knows how we suffered, experiencing death so closely every day. The rich and influential have wronged us. We lost our lives, and they can't spend a penny in jail." It is clear corporate America is running away from its responsibility in order to protect profits and its vast fortunes it has overseas. This is exactly what former Carbide director Joseph Goken implied when he spoke about Warren Anderson in hiding. He said, and I quote, "Extradition in a case like this would place in jeopardy any owner or senior executive of an American corporation with significant interest in foreign enterprises anywhere in the world. The chilling effect on American investment abroad," he said, "cannot be overstated." Ms. McVie, we cannot allow corporate profits or US interventionism to get in the way of fresh investigations and reparations that the Bhopali people are calling for. Under international law, they have a right to redress and rehabilitation for harm done by companies that operate across borders. We must therefore assert and uphold the rule of law. We cannot allow class wars or discrimination against workers or the working class in Bhopal, India, to get in the way of calls for justice. If the corporate manslaughter had taken place in Surrey or upstate New York, levels of compensation would have been significant and justice would have been seen to be done. We cannot value the lives of people overseas in Bhopal, India, less than we do lives here in the UK. The disparity in treatment between industrial accidents here in the West and over there in the global South must not be allowed to stand. The UK, I believe, is in a unique position to explore remedies for Bhopal survivors due to its long-standing history with India. And of course, its long-standing history with the US, behind whose borders Dow is currently hiding. As the UK is deep into negotiations, we know now, with India on an important trade deal, both countries have an opportunity to explore whether the UK is in a position to assist India, which in January, actually, will be making arguments for additional compensation from Dow and Union Carbide before its Supreme Court in securing adequate, timely remedies so cruelly denied to Bhopal survivors for so long. I believe for the UK Parliament to be most effective in this approach, as well as the issues that have already been put forward as action in how we move forward, I don't think it would be wrong for an independent fact-finding mission to Bhopal to re-examine the realities on the ground to happen. I believe that it's required and that it will unpick the legal and political obstacles and recommend ways forward. It would be the first time a member of the international community to have stepped up to intervene in what has so far been treated as an adversarial dispute. It's not an adversarial dispute between two parties. It's a situation which has only prolonged the suffering of survivors. The tragedy of Bhopal is one of the gravest miscarriages of justice of our time. And given our two countries' unique history, the UK must be moved to morally correct that injustice. Thank you, Ms. McVie.